trying to figure out what is an authentic differentiator for your business versus the next guy is really the value.
This one's for the disruptors, the uncommon, the unconventional, the rebels. You're not here to take things lying down. Well, season 2 is about shaking things up. I'm Beatrice, and this is the Art of Branding podcast. Be ready, be badass. Let's shake some shit up. I still remember the first conversation with today's guest where they said their industry may not be so exciting, but damn, do they blow the competition out of the way? And well, you know, that's what we're about. Shaking the industry norms up. And that's what we've proceeded to do over the last few months. We've got on cam the principal at Banbury Lane Design, the architectural and cabinet hardware consultants supporting designs and projects to go from paper to reality that's backed for freaking life. Man, it has been fun. Now, I don't know if I should be worried or if I should be excited, but you've now got the chance to spill all the goss. So, what's it felt like going through the process?
I'll be honest, going through the process is painful because it forces you to look at things that maybe you've never looked at before. And our business has been around for almost 40 years, and we've never really put together a concerted effort to look at, who we are, what our stories are. Maybe we don't think we're that interesting, and maybe we don't think that other people will think our story's that interesting. It was tough to get into that mode a lot of the time. It took a couple months for me to warm up, but once we got in there, we started talking about, why we're special and, the things that we do that are a little bit different. It really got a lot easier to start opening up and telling those stories in a meaningful way.
Like anything that's worthwhile, right? Like it does kind of need to have a little bit of uncomfortableness. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, putting in the work, etc., and then later on being able to use it and adapt from it and grow from it. Where were you before you wanted to get into refreshing the brand strategy?
Part of the reason why the whole process took a little while for us to wrap our heads around was, we're so focused on the day-to-day of running the business and, doing projects and capturing sales and dealing with staff and dealing with customer issues. And we never took the time to sort of step back and look at the whole picture. And really what prompted this was, taking our business, which is a traditional brick and mortar business, and trying to replicate that experience online, which is really difficult to do unless you've got, a couple hundred people working on your website and absolutely massive budgets to throw at it. And as a smaller business, we don't have that. So we had to find a way and find the right partners to help us sort of take that step back and really help us understand where we're at and what our differentiation is and how do we, tell that story in a succinct way. Because that's the other part of the problem is, when people know you and they know your business for as long as they do, sometimes it's hard to articulate their experience to new potential customers. So I think, transitioning our business into a more sort of modern version without really changing the business is really the fine line that we're trying to walk. So.
As you mentioned, that consistency from, you've got that established presence. Everybody in the community there knows. And then when you want to expand to, say, for example, other areas, it's like, okay, be it online, be it like different locations, etc. It's that consistency. I feel like it's often like comes up with many businesses. It's like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. But then when it actually comes to play for, implementation, say for example, we're talking about like how that would look like, what's that experience online to have that appear, be it like on socials or be it on website. Like it is a different way of thinking about it, right?
And what we really struggled with was the understanding that You go to someone's website and it's an amazing website. Someone built that, and you have to focus on all the little minor details, and they're all very important. These things don't just build themselves. If you're not focused on, staying true to your brand and staying true to, who you are, you can really easily lose the thread. And then what you're putting out there isn't really representative of who you are. And that's the challenge we face for sure.
I mean, you know as well as I do that there are so many different things that you could go into, be it like different marketing investments, like social media, ad spend, like brand strategy, etc. What made you think about brand strategy at that time?
Well, I think, sort of what I said before, right, was we realized that we needed to firm up our online presence, figure out what that meant for us. And then once you build something, and then you're like, okay, well, this is what we built. Let's try to market it. Let's try to spend some money on Google AdWords, or let's pay someone to run our social media. Let's run a shopping campaign. Let's try this. Let's spend money on SEO. There's so many little tentacles and so many little areas that you can spend your money. And everyone tells you the same thing, you'll get great reports and your conversion rate will triple and we'll be there every step of the way. And frankly, none of that's true, in our experience, at least. And I think what we found is, maybe we struggled with those ideas and those avenues because we hadn't really firmed up who we actually are. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know that, but we don't know how to articulate that. And we don't have, some guidelines set. We didn't at that point have really a kind of a cohesive approach. And I think, the best thing we did was pull away from all those sort of schemes and try to rein it in and focus first more on establishing, what that narrative is and what our brand looks like. And now we've built that. Now I think we'll have a little bit more success in building out our strategy. What's nice now too, after we've gone through all this, is now we can do things that feel authentic to our brand and not just do them because people say you should do it.
Exactly. And, it makes me think like there would be a lot of other businesses out there, like similar sort of thing. Like, okay, so Banbury Lane has been around for 38 years, or maybe it's almost 39 now. And it's like, I do see, correct me if I'm wrong, other businesses that have been out there for a long time kind of miss out on that point. They're like, oh, we've been around for so long, like it's fine. Like maybe it's just being so much like in it that you're not working on it and having that like refined. What do you think?
I think that's a big struggle that a lot of businesses and especially business owners have. Especially when it's a smaller business, and you don't have, multi levels of management teams and all that. You really end up getting caught in, running the day-to-day business and working in the business versus taking that step back and trying to actually work on the business, right? And whether that's, a staff issue, a training issue, a confidence issue. There's so many little pitfalls that can keep you sort of locked in that cycle of, well, I'll just take this meeting or I'll just take this call when you know that you do have people in place that should be doing that work. Sometimes you feel like you have to be that touch and that's the brand. And in some cases that is, but so it's a challenge, right? And I think a lot of companies and a lot of people struggle with that. And we struggle with that all the time, every day. So we're really trying, to focus on growing the business and running the business versus, doing the day-to-day and running every sale and taking every meeting and receiving all the boxes and going out to sites to fix problems. Like we're really trying to take a step back and grow and run the business. And I think it's really important. And this is a big part of it.
Oh my God, like, that you mentioned that, I see that so frequently. And I feel like it's almost an invisible line that stops a lot of businesses to level up, where, you're just so focused, like being in that business and being like in that day to day, because you've been like, a lot of businesses, you've been doing it for so long. It's like, this is the norm. So it's almost like you have to reprogram like the way of thinking. It's like, wait, let me just step back. And I know like we've spoken about this as well. Like, let's like step back and see from like that oversight sort of thing.
Yeah, I think too, it's sort of like a comfort mode, right? Mm-hmm. When you're trying to grow or you're trying to build something or you're, trying to fix maybe a bigger problem in your business. Yeah. Sometimes it's more comfortable to spend your time doing things that you know that you're good at. Right. And that's the easy answer. And I think a lot of people probably fall into that,
Exactly.
This task I have to do to grow the business is terrifying and I have no idea how to do it. And there's 10 messages and 20 emails that I know how to hammer out. And it's an easier way to spend my time. And it feels like you're making more progress. I think when you're doing things that are challenging or new or, you may not know if the investment of your time is going to pay off. It's pretty easy to push that off. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. We struggle with that too all the time. But I think that's something that maybe a lot of people fall into.
Oh, God, yeah. Like I get that so much because I do that like quite often where it's like, oh, let me do these easy things. And then you think it's like only going to take you a minute, but those things build up and then the day is gone. It's like, oh, right. Okay. So that's a tomorrow thing. And then like, it just keeps on rolling until the next day or until you're like, okay, I'm sick of my own shit. Let's get on top of this. But speaking of surprises and things that, pushing us outside of our comfort zone, what kind of things surprised you going through the strategy and the implementation?
I think part of it was just how simple the questions were and how simple some of the expectations were. I think we get caught in this trap where we think everything has to be polished and everything has to be on trend or whatever you have it. I think when you're asking pointed and direct and simple questions about who we are and what we want and what we want our customers to want and how we want them to feel, I think that's what I was most surprised about. It was just a very genuine look at who we are, where we've been, and where we want to go versus we should be focusing on XYZ trend on social media and you need to dump a bucket of water on your head to fit in or something stupid like that. I think, it was really refreshing to take a look back and have, especially having you to guide us and just, poking and prodding and being like, you're not trying hard enough on this. This is not what I'm looking for. Right. So I think that was surprising to me because I honestly didn't know what we were getting into when I first started talking. I have a new rule though, that we don't do any business with cold calls anymore because we've been burned too many times. So, anytime we want to take something on, we're going to do our research first and we're going to find out, who we want to work with before. And I think that's a better approach for us at least. And, I was really pleasantly surprised with, how succinct your side of it was. Like you obviously have a plan and, sort of what levers to pull and when. And I was surprised with how much work that you do on the back end, in your own time to help us sort of polish and smooth out. And I found that really refreshing where it wasn't just, we've hired you to help us and I have to do all the work, because a lot of times I feel like that happens and that's not a it's not a great relationship. It's not really a great partnership. So I was really pleasantly surprised with that. And, I think we've built something really cool, and I'm really excited to see how it sort of plays out here in the next couple months.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a really good point. I think we learn that a lot, in school. It's like, hey, this needs to be complicated or complex for it to be the right thing. When, you know, in actual reality, when we're doing business or when we're doing like marketing or like, anything like that, it should be like simple. Okay, not easy, but simple for sure. And like a lot of the time it is fun. Like, okay, there are the sucky bits, which are like, finance, etc. But you know, the brand is so much like a part of your entity, your what you came in with, that it should bring out like a bit of that passion, right?
What we were trying to suss out was, what are our intangibles, right? And what makes us special, not just to ourselves, but to our customers. And how can we take what that is, and how do we use that to get more customers, right? Ultimately, and I think, when we're looking to find out what that is, and put that down on paper, you have to use sort of simple language, and you have to use, things that are honest, and things that represent, who you are as a company and who you are as a brand. And I think if you try to over polish it, or use big words or things like that, it's going to come off wrong and disingenuous.
It doesn't connect on that deeper side, because whoever it is that you're working with, like from any perspective, right? Unless you're like, your client is an AI or something, right? There's always going to be those emotions. There's always going to be that personal side. We're not always like in a boardroom. In fact, that's maybe 1% of the time that we're in a meeting or something like that. And even then, it's like going into that with like a open, casual, like free flow. Like, okay, yes, we have this structure, but like, let's see how this rolls, because that's where the ideas come from, right? Like, go down this little rabbit hole, and then we can pull out like A, B, C, D, things that like you wouldn't necessarily think are important, but like once you start going further into it.
Well, yeah, I remember when we first started, I would write these like monster paragraphs and essays, basically answering your questions, which I'm sure was super annoying. But we found little nuggets of gold in all the mud. So I think that was a very helpful approach, at least for me.
And I get that. Like, we all have our different styles and approaches to things. Like, I probably would do the same. Like, I might leave a voice note, which is like a 5-minute long voice note, but like in that, there'll be like, bits of like, hey, wait, there's this and this and this. And it's like, sometimes it just takes us working through something. And I'm so happy that like you guys reached out so that we could go down this as well. And going down this, I know, like narrowing down in audiences, we started out on your 3 big ones. And while they're not entirely gone from the picture, we've honed down on one primary one. And I know there was some friction there, which I know many listeners have feelings about. Like, a lot of people really struggle to be like, let's just really focus on this one, and that doesn't detract from the others. Can you tell me about your feelings around that, or the journey around that?
Absolutely. I think, this business was started as a resource and as a tool for our community to get better products and get higher quality products and get, real customer service, and to work with a company that, would have their backs and would help someone with a small job. And if someone needed 2 little cabinet knobs, or, a weird paint that they couldn't find, we would be there and we would source it and we would help them and we would actually care about what the outcome was. As this business has evolved and as, the market for what we do has changed, these higher end projects now, everyone has a designer, everyone has a builder or an architect. There's always now someone else involved, right? So I think, for us in our market, for our product category, the interior designers really are the target. They're the ones that are, pushing the pace on, new designs, bringing in things that they see when they go travel to shows or things they found on the internet, and trying to figure out how to actually put that into something in real life. And ultimately, I think the friction for us was, we never want to lose our roots. We will still help someone who's coming in trying to replace two little cabinet knobs from a piece of furniture that they bought 60 years ago, or it was passed down from one of their grandparents or whatever. We're happy to do that. I know a lot of other companies that do what we do, they sort of scoff and they sort of push those people off. And I think that's the complete wrong approach. So I think when we were talking about, how do we find our demo and who do we find who we're telling this story to, I think for me, the friction was, we don't want to lose, our who we are, and we don't want to lose where we came from, because ultimately we're still the same group of people. We still have the same values. And I think, it really clicked for us when, we start talking about, in our case specifically, ultimately that end customer, the homeowner, is really still our end customer. We may be now working more with the designers and the builders, but ultimately, if we're aligned with trying to put out the best possible product for that end customer, and if that happens through serving the designer and the builder to our best ability and living up to our core values, and ultimately that's going to translate to that end customer. So I think, once we sort of were able to wrap our heads around that a little bit, it felt more genuine to who we are, and it feels appropriate, because ultimately, in 10 years, when the designer's out of the picture and working on more great new projects, we're going to get the call from the homeowner being like, hey, I need some new keys cut, or hey, I need one of my handle sets broke, or hey, I broke a cabinet knob, can you help me? And of course, we're going to be there to help them out. So I think that was a really important distinction for us, and I'm really happy that we were able to, put together something that felt honest and allows us to still be who we are. So that was really a very important, but B, I'm really happy with the outcome.
Going into choosing and really honing down on a target audience, it's not about losing the others, right? Like it's still keeping them in mind. They're not going to disappear, if what your message is, and like it's super honed, it's super refined, they're still going to resonate with it. But your specific target audience, like when you know them, your messaging is super clear. You know who you're talking to, you know how you're talking to, you even know, like, say, for example, in terms of positioning and what we were talking about, like how you can best be suited, like to be, say, for example, perceived earlier than others in the industry, right?
It was really nice to have our business goals and what we're trying to achieve at the forefront, right? And I think that's really important. So forgot to mention that earlier, but that's a big part of it, right? We're trying to change the narrative a little bit, as far as, when we get involved in projects and, trying to educate, especially new customers, that the sooner that we're able to get into a project, not only the more value can we add to their projects and what they're building for their end customer, but ultimately, it allows us to get in sooner, build out some higher dollar POs, and do projects with cooler products that maybe take a little bit more foresight. So it's not entirely unself-serving. We're in a business, and ultimately we're here to make money, or else it's just a terrible hobby. So Um, we're always mindful of that, right? But ultimately, we don't have a business if it's not for our customers. So really, our main focus is trying to provide cool and relevant products.
From the initial discussion, it's something that we kept on coming back to. These goals and making sure that everything that we're doing is in line with that. And now if we look, comparing to others in the market, right? Like their approach is just like the standard. Okay, like this is the only option, right? Where we're at. Whereas now, when you start talking about like these resources and being there at that earlier stage, you're jumping the queue, right? It's like you're still in the same kind of field, but the game it's a totally different game.
Yeah, and I think we've changed the rules a little bit to serve ourselves, but I like that. I think a lot of companies, when they're trying to do what we're trying to accomplish, they take on things that they don't know much about. They bring on new products. They insert themselves in a different part of the process, and I don't think that's very, very wise unless you've got a lot of money to throw behind a rollout. But how do you take what you do and tell the story of why it's important that you're considered earlier? Why, because it's going to allow you to make more money. But how do you translate that to an actual value that your customers can acknowledge and see the benefit of? That's the really difficult part.
And something that we had that friction for a little while, as like we're bouncing around these ideas. It's like, how do we make sure that's also something that they understand? It's not something completely like out of the water, right? It still needs to be like a graspable idea.
How do you do all this without looking like a wiener, right? And looking greasy, right? Like what's so it is a really fine line, and ultimately, I think it's why we needed a partner,
Yeah.
right? And that's why we brought you on. Is how can you help us polish this enough, and how can you help us
Holding true to that tradition. Like 38 years is nothing to scoff at, right? It's, you don't want somebody to come in and be like, for Lips Table, let's like just do something completely left field, put some like neon lights on it, right?
I mean, you always want to look for a refresh, and I think when you're frustrated with where you're at, sometimes the trap is to change too much, really flip it. But ultimately, I think you have to find ways of updating while staying true to who you are and what you're known for, right? I mean, not only is it um, better for yourself, because then when you're talking to someone new, you're not confused about what your brand is now on Tuesday when it was something different on Friday. That's a big thing. But also too, you need to look like a real business, right? You can't be changing your hair color every day, right?
I mean, you could. It might damage your hair a lot, but
I mean, it's just, we're trying to look at, obviously we had a lot of years of neglect and zero focus on this side of it. And I think when you have that, sometimes you're tempted to make a really big change because you haven't done anything. But I think that's just going to be a shock to the whole system. The whole ecosystem is going to suffer.
Exactly.
I think, a little bit of focused attention on language and story, and trying to figure out what is an authentic differentiator for your business versus the next guy is really the value.
Exactly.
And that's how you can, incorporate little changes over time, right? And the little changes can be things like making sure all your font is the same on all your platforms, or all your colors are the same, right? These are the things that really make that difference and make you look a little bit more professional. And I think that's maybe where we were struggling a little bit, not seeing what the value is in that. So.
And it's the nuances, right? And, that even helps. Say, for example, when you want to get your team to buy in. And so, from that practical sense, right? We went from like, okay, this is a strategy, like these are the different elements. And then going into action for, from the get-go, were there, on that practical sense, any surprises or thoughts?
Yeah, I think really it was just, the challenge was just putting it into writing, putting it into a document that can be analyzed. How do you take 40 years of experience and boil it down to a couple sentences, especially a couple cohesive sentences? So I think that was a real hurdle. It seems like something so ingrained in what we do every day that it so well, but you can't articulate it. It's really a bizarre feeling. So and that's why that was a big struggle for us. Was you're asking very simple questions that should be a very simple answer. Ultimately, maybe you don't actually know, right? And maybe you think and maybe you just haven't thought about it, so you're trying to scramble and find an answer, right? So I think that was a real struggle, was actually just getting into the mind frame of what are we trying to accomplish, and what are our goals in doing this, and if this all goes how we want it to, what do we want it to sound like? And I think that was really, once you started thinking about it that way, it became a lot easier.
Putting it into operations, getting the team buy-in, putting it into like socials, into like website, into like all these bits.
I think because we did it the right way. Like I was mentioning, we didn't try to just throw a whole new brand identity at it. I think, the buy-in from the team's really there, because really what we're doing is using appropriate language to describe what they're already doing. We just had to find what that was. And I think so in doing that, it's not like they came to work on Monday and their whole job is different. Like we didn't drastically change our business operations, right? Maybe we teach them, how to approach their job in a different way, and educate them on what the value is, what their purpose is, and how they're improving the lives of the customers they work with, or making their lives worse, depending if it's a bad interaction. But, just seeing what their role is, I think it's really important. I think sometimes people, lose focus on, what their purpose is in their job, especially if they're not responsible for, if they don't own the business or whatever. They want to come to work and they want to feel valued, and they want to feel, that they're making contribution to something bigger than themselves. And I think when we are honest about who we are and where we're going, what we want to do, and we're just giving them a new mindset and a new mind frame, I think it's really easy to adopt.
And I think that's a big thing that many businesses miss, especially not the big ones like Nike, whatever, etc. Like they have big corporations, hundreds of millions of dollars, etc. to throw at this, but it's like taking the strategy, taking these concepts, taking these ideas, and putting them into play. Be it with the team, and even in terms of, say, for example, okay, if you want to be considered earlier, how would the team act? How can the team be trained accordingly? Say, for example, like when you're hiring new people, okay, like how are they going to align with these values, etc.?
When we hire people, we hire off of two things. We hire off of positive attitude and willingness to learn. This industry is really specific. Mm-hmm. and there's not necessarily a big talent pool to pull from, especially in our region. So really, we're hiring people that have those two attributes first, and if they don't have them, they don't come on board. So when we make some changes and we tweak direction a little bit, because the base of our team is built off of those two premises, I mean, we're able to make changes pretty nimbly, and I think it's pretty important. So we want to make sure that we're giving our team the tools, right, to provide value for not only themselves but for our customers. So I think this has been a really good tool for that, and it's given us a little toolbox to say, hey, this is what we are, this is what we do, and this is who we do it for, and this is your role, and this is why it's important, and this is what we're looking for. So it's really helped, not only just on the external facing side, but helping to firm up, what is our internal brand, what is our ethos, what is our mentality, what's our approach to the market, what's our mindset, what kind of mindset do we want to be teaching our customers when they come in and look at a product range that's maybe not necessarily super well understood. I think it's really, really valuable.
There's so much in that, even from the internal team to when you're hiring externally, okay, when you get a social media team, there's already that little toolbox there, hey guys, this is what you have to go off, rather than a lot of the time, I mean, I've had this operational marketing experience, and you're going into a new company and it's we got nothing, or we got 5 different sets of things, have at it and see what works. Right?
Yeah, well, and I think that's too why we struggled in the past with bringing on new partners, to do some of these things that do cost quite a bit of money. We didn't have this toolbox, we didn't have this formally laid out. We didn't say, hey, here is your sandbox, this is what you're allowed to play with, and this is the direction. When you're trying to figure it out on the fly, or when you're trying to just throw things at the wall and see if they stick, it's just a recipe for disaster. And especially when you're throwing money at something that you have no control over, like a Google ad spend or something like that, it's not a great approach to advertising and marketing.
Exactly.
So,
speaking of mistakes, I know you love this topic. What are the common industry mistakes that you've seen in competition now that you've gone through all this?
One that really sticks in my side is trends, hopping on social movements as a brand, and that's your whole brand identity, I think is really short-sighted. Yep. And that's one that really drives me crazy. Another one is just flat, dull, language and just information. This is what we sell, and it's a picture of a cabinet hardware piece on a blank, just imagery, and that's one that I've really noticed. A really big one is just inappropriate use of terms. Remember we were going through this thing about quiet luxury, and we were on this path for a while, and we saw one of my competitors, they put up a post, and it was a god-awful piece of cabinet hardware on the most basic piece of millwork. And they're like, this is timeless elegance or quiet luxury. And I almost spat out my coffee. I was like, this is garbage. So things like that really, 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 really bother me. I could go on for hours about things that bother me.
I think we got it.
We'll save everyone the time. But, I think really to sum it up, it's just, everyone is just doing the same thing, and they're just doing it with a different logo on top.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I think the trap is thinking that you have to come up with something new.
Exactly.
To stand out. And I think actually what you have to do is step away and look towards what you're already doing right. What's the intangible, and trying to figure that out. And then putting pretty pictures around it. But I think that's the trick. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm wrong.
I think at this point you could be writing my content for me like that. I couldn't say it better. Anyway, there is one question that I ask everybody that comes on board, and that is, what's the biggest societal norm that you want to push back on and teach others about?
Instagram is just ads. Step away and do something fun.
Ooh.
Spend time with your family. It's all just marketing. Get
outside, go to the backyard like we used to as kids. I mean, why do kids not do that anymore?
Go spend time with your family. Go for a walk.
What's that again?
Do something else. Do something else. Unless you like just looking at ads.
Or, yeah, you need something specific. But no, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Cam. You can learn more about Cam and Banbury Lane in the podcast show notes. And thanks for listening to the Art of Branding podcast. Loved it and want to support. A Badass Way is dropping a 5-star review. And when you're ready to shift gear in your own business from just another to the obvious one, visit badasswaybyb.com to get started. Let's freaking go.
Time for bloopers. Yay!
Were there any unforeseen challenges during the project?
Several unforeseen challenges, mostly self-caused. Having a partner that is actually interested in your success is refreshing. And it took a while for me to figure out, how much work I needed to put in and how much care and attention it needed from my side to, allow Beatrice to, do what she does best. So I think just be prepared that you have to try and you have to put your heart into it. That will allow Beatrice to do what she's amazing at. So that was the main struggle at the outset. But now that we've locked in and figured out our flow, we're going well.
Kicking ass, yeah.
Is that the right answer?
Really?